don't know the particulars of Florida's energy monopoly. I know that a bunch of power grids are run by these like pseudo government organizations, and that creates a lot of problems. And I don't know the specifics of that bill. I will say that I'm a big nuclear power guy, especially when it comes to like the climate change issue. And what I've found in my research, and there's a documentary that features something that happened in Long Island where they built up a nuclear power plant. There's a story about the Cuomos, Mario Cuomo to be specific, and it was ready to go. Like they did the test, they tested at 5% capacity and all that. It was all good. And then all of a sudden, a campaign was launched against it. And obviously, these anti-nuclear campaigns have been in this country for decades and decades, even though statistically it's the safest energy that you could have. Like more people die climbing up windmills to do repairs than in nuclear power plants. And especially when you factor in radiation, it's just not a thing. And this plant ended up getting shut down by Mario Cuomo. And there's actually copies of the ads because, in the bottom it says you have to paid for by this organization and all that. And the ads heavily feature solar. They're like, we should do solar instead of nuclear. Like solar's the way and all that. This is like in Mario Cuomo's reign. So this is, 90s or
1984.
Yeah, 1980s. Sorry. Yeah. And those pro solar ads were paid for by the oil and gas industry. Like, so a lot of times they use green energy products as a proxy to get their foot in the door, because even if we innovate in such a way that solar and wind works, unless we have the battery capacity to store, there's always going to be at least a natural gas backup, worst case scenario, a coal backup. And this is one of the reasons why, like, I'm very pro nuclear. So I don't know the situation specifically in Florida. And if it's something that was allowing, if they really have a monopoly and it was supposed to allow the consumers to pay less to the company, then I could understand them lobbying against that. But I will say a lot of times the subsidies that for green energy are really subsidies for fossil fuel companies under another name. And a lot of that is due to the fact that we're just terrified of nuclear. Because of the China Syndrome, that movie, and
There's
3 Mile Island.
People, even friend of the show, Lauren Steiner's people who understand science, health, and economics are against nuclear power. And I've seen this. We've gone over this back and forth a lot on our show. We actually had somebody on talking about nuclear power. And my position on it is that if you get enough really smart people together, they can come up with solutions. And so I do not understand the science enough to say that, oh, this is the one way or this is not the way. But I think that in the position that we're in, to worry about long-term effects of something that's better than what we're using is sort of like, it's a moot point. Like like nuclear, I'm sure does have problems. I
actually do support nuclear from this perspective. We've had Michael Schellenberger on the podcast. We'll probably have him back on again. There is a fourth generation nuclear technology that I'm sure you're familiar with, Sean, that is basically supposed to reappropriate and basically replenish nuclear waste. And that, to me, that is the issue with the current system of nuclear, is that it does produce nuclear waste. There is adverse health effects. Is it the same as what happens with fracking wells and with coal mines? Probably not. However, that doesn't mean that it's not bad. And obviously things like Chernobyl and Fukushima, those are always the outliers and they're terrible. But what cannot be denied is that if nuclear version 4 is going to allow for the elimination of nuclear waste, and it's ultimately going to bring us one step closer to nuclear fusion, then that is the direction that we absolutely have to take if we're not able to unilaterally just, again, this is one of the things that I think if Bernie Sanders was president, he would have ultimately done, which was implement the Defense Production Act and just start building out the solar fields, the wind farms, and the geothermal plants and whatnot. But Joe Biden is completely bought off by big oil. So, there's, to me, I think that's a big part of it.
I would say so. I was anti-nuclear when I didn't know anything. I watched The Simpsons. I saw the that cartoon.
Three-eyed fish, man.
Yeah. But the thing is that even nuclear waste is a total misdirect, because if you stack all of the nuclear waste that we've made throughout human history, it fits on about half of a football field, about 10 feet high. Like it's not that it doesn't produce that much waste. And so even without the I believe it's the thorium plant that would use the waste from previous plants. Even without that, it's still not that huge of a problem. Obviously, there's a lot of fear. Fukushima, you named, is a perfect example of this. But it turns out the 2 people died from Fukushima. And the 2 people who died during the evacuation due to the panic, due to the fear of the radiation from the Fukushima reactor. So we're greatly overestimating the effects of the dangers of nuclear power. And I think it's due in part to the fact that we think of the atomic bomb. We had the movie The China Syndrome come out, and I think 3 Mile Island melted down like 2 weeks later. So people were expecting that to happen. On top of that, they have it's radiation, so it's invisible. So we get scared because we can't see it. And there's always that idea for potential harm. But one of the things I'm most interested in is apparently in the 50s in the nuclear playground, we had a reactor that uses liquid metal. It's like I forgot what it's called, but it's basically a liquefied metal instead of water. And during the reaction, if the reactor's overheating, because heat expands, the fusion reaction will actually halt because the whatever particles won't be able to bounce off of each other because they have to do it within a certain range. And this is a nuclear reactor that can't melt down because of that. So it will self-shut down. And we've had that since the 50s. We never built it out to any scale because we needed nuclear submarines. And one of the downsides of the liquid metal is that it explodes if it comes into contact with water. So obviously it wasn't good for a submarine, but that's the only reason we have in all of the nuclear reactors water-based cooling systems, which a lot of what went wrong in these nuclear plants that had meltdowns is that the generators didn't work, so the water couldn't cool the reactor.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of information is misinformation out there, and people basically just like to work backwards from their conclusions. And I think that whatever your conclusion, you're going to find the information that sort of like justifies what your belief system is on this. And I've just always been very open to the idea because in my mind, we are not going to be able to live the lives that we live with green energy the way we have it set up now. It's not possible. You can't fly a plane on solar. So there's certain things that require a level of energy that we just do not have at this point in time doing with green energy. We just don't.
Right.
Would people be willing to sacrifice?
I will say there are electric planes. Like they're working on them. And the cool thing about electric cars, I used to be like, I'm mean, bad man, conservative. Electric cars, those are for wusses. I've been converted on the electric cars, except for the fact that a lot of them are powered by fossil fuels when you plug them in. But like they're very low maintenance. Like it's a very tiny motor because all it is a battery connected to a motor. Almost everything in the car's engine is built to compensate for the fact that you're creating a little mini explosion in the engine. And electric cars don't have that problem. So like there is advancements in electric technology and all that. And I'm fully on board with that. Also, a bunch of the like Tesla, the leader in electric cars, manufactures their cars in the United States. And, so that's wonderful for like the jingoism element of it. But I will say the cost of fossil fuels in terms of deaths from like outdoor air pollution, it's something like 30 to 40,000 people die from diseases that are from illnesses related to that would be gone if they were getting their energy supplied to them by nuclear. And when you look at like the actual people who died from radiation from nuclear, it's very small, and most of it is related to Chernobyl, and even that's dramatically overstated. Even the preventable cancers that are aggravated, like the thyroid cancers, it's something, the estimate is like 4,000, and that's the worst disaster that we've ever had. And there's actual consequences to not going nuclear. The Germans very famously like invested twice as much money over time into solar energy and wind energy as the French did into their nuclear system. Now, the French were doing this unrelated to climate change back in like the 70s. They were building up these reactors. If you don't count the German carbon reductions that came from when East and West Germany unified and they shut down the very dirty coal plants from the Soviet Union side of it, if you don't count those carbon reductions, since Germany has invested in this technology, their carbon footprint has gone up dramatically. But the French carbon footprint has gone down, and they get a huge portion of the energy in their grid from nuclear power. Like, this works. Even Japan, pre-Fukushima, they were reducing carbon because they were heavily reliant on nuclear. Post-Fukushima, now that everybody's scared, their carbon footprint is going up because they're importing coal in order to supply their energy.
And the one argument that you do make that I think is very valid is the fact that nuclear is not subsidized the way that solar is. And listen, I think solar is great, but you got to keep it 100. The truth is the amount of solar panels it takes to equal one nuclear power plant, even if it's a generation 4, is a lot. And we cannot underestimate how vital it is for us to get off of coal and natural gas. We have to do it. And the only way it's going to happen is if we have all ideas on the table. I tell people all the time, and this is people who think that it's not, the environment's not in risk and climate change is overrated and all that. I say, well, if you have a choice between a solar field and a fracking well in your backyard, which one are you taking? And we all know what the answer is. So I think having this conversation is immensely important because there are people in the chat who are talking about, well, it takes a long time to build the nuclear reactor and this, that, and the other thing. And the attitude should basically be, well, we've basically been given a timeline of about 10 years. So if we're going to work within that parameter, it's not going to take 10 years to build, a fleet of nuclear power plants in various parts of the country. And if you're overly concerned about where they are, I got news for you, ladies and gentlemen. There are endless amounts of empty space throughout the United States. You may just not know about it, especially out west. And, to me, we really have to be collectively having this conversation because if we're not going to get bogged down in, like I said, pointless stupidity, staying on, as Jen likes to say, staying on the hamster wheel, this is key. And I do think, and that's why having Schellenberger back will be very important. I have not been, I was adverse to nuclear before, but after really doing a lot of research on, the fourth, generation of nuclear power, I think it is definitely something that could mitigate a lot of the problems that we have now. And if we're going to reduce our carbon footprint, which, let's face it, that's supposed to be the most important issue here, nuclear basically has very little, if any, carbon footprint. And when you compare that to...
The footprint would be in the construction. Once it's up and running, it's just water vapor that's coming up from those stacks.
Thanks for watching. If you want to support our mission to transform politics into service, please like this video, subscribe, follow us on social media, and consider joining our Patreon, where you'll get early access to our interviews as well as other exclusive content. Links are in the description. Peace out.